Hi, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon for the Future Face of Major Events 2021. I think we got some fantastic guests joining us today, and I think it should be an incredibly enlightening discussion, particularly given yesterday's announcements, which we'll go obviously more into as we have a discussion. Now, the UK major event sector has long been one of the real world-class sectors of the hospitality sector, of the hospitality industry, and it plays a very central role in both society and our daily lives. And actually, I think how it impacts is a great benchmark for telling us exactly where we are in the road for recovery, and actually where we are as a society as well. So I think it's fair to say that yesterday's announcements have been met with some sighs, some exasperation, and some real concerns, which we'll go into. And it also raises a number of major questions about what are we really facing now, which is almost that second surge, and how are we going to cope with that. Some research came out recently that noted that the industry this year has lost £9 billion in lost revenues out of a normal annual intake of 14 billion. And actually the question, I suppose, is what's happening now, will that figure actually get worse? I also read a report this morning that noted that the average venue has lost between about £2.3 million in lost sales. It is a real concern. And actually one of the questions is, and I think the whole industry has coped admirably well up to this point. Is this a tipping point that will actually make everyone lose heart? Or is this a way that we've actually just got to find new energy to actually find a new way forward? Question mark. Add in Brexit, and actually 72% of businesses feel that actually they'll cut more bookings as a result of Brexit, so which actually just makes the situation even that little bit more hard. So we face some real challenges, and actually we're joined today by the experts who can actually help us find a way through that. So welcome, and I hope you enjoy the next 1.5 hours of debate and discussion. However, we can only do these events with support from our partners. So I'd just like to say thank you to both Liquidline and Dynamify for their support. And firstly, introduce Anthony Grumbridge from Liquidline just to say a few words. Anthony. Welcome.
Thanks, Chris. Good afternoon, everybody. For those of you that don't know, I'm Anthony from Liquidline. Joining today as I'm extremely passionate about the topic that we're about to embark on. And certainly share the pain that a lot will be feeling today in this particular sector. Most of you, I'm sure, will be aware that Liquidline have an emphasis on premium coffee offerings. And as such, we've supported many events on a large and small scale with premium quality coffee. What we often see, however, is at these events where time is of the essence in terms of moving people through quickly, often catering teams resort to basic bulk brew coffee offerings, which quite frankly is hot and wet at best. So I suppose where we've come in and where we fit in is what we've tried to do is innovate, and we've brought about some alternative solutions that enables still the speed of delivery, which is so critically important, but massively upgrades the experience. So we've come up with a bag-in-box coffee concept, so a coffee that's brewed under extraction rather than the traditional bulk brew method, and a milk product that can dispense latte and cappuccino foam at the touch of a button, so very, very fast. But I think today, in today's world where premium coffee is the expectation and indeed the norm, clearly bulk brew coffee has a limited life expectancy. So this has really revolutionized the whole coffee provision and experience, and we're continually innovating in other areas to continually enhance the guest experience. So we're very much looking forward to when things return to some sort of normality and we can get out there again and deliver great quality coffee on a volume basis. But I'm really looking forward to today's debate, very much looking forward to hearing what everyone's got to say. And that's really it for me for now, Chris.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. Very good. Thank you. Please enjoy. Can I now welcome into our panel of guests? Let's start with Neil McLaurin, Chairman of D&G and a non-executive with Bartlett Mitchell. Welcome, Neil.
Christopher, good afternoon. You well?
All good, thank you very much. Greg Lawson, Founder and Chief Executive of Smart Group Hospitality.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me.
No, it's a pleasure to have you, Greg. Andrew White, the Managing Director of Triggerfish, who will obviously talk from a different perspective.
Hi, Chris. This is going to be a good one, isn't it?
It should be a fascinating one, absolutely fascinating. We can't see you as quite yet.
Okay.
Hi, welcome. I'd be interested to see your views, particularly from the London market as well, because those venues must be having a hard time.
Oh, yeah.
Paul Jackson, Managing Director of Searcy's. Hi, welcome, Paul.
See you. Thank you.
John Davis, Managing Director of Levy UK.
Hi, Chris. Good afternoon.
Hi, John. Thank you. Kevin Watson, Managing Director of Amadeus.
Good afternoon, Chris. Hi.
Hi, Kevin. Thank you. And Adam Elliott, the co-founder of Paragon Hospitality.
Hi, Chris.
Hi.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. Look, thank you all for joining us today. I think we should have a fascinating discussion over the next hour and a quarter or so. Look, let's start with yesterday's announcements, and Kevin, may I kick off with you on this one, because I guess you obviously run the NEC group, and it's obviously one which is going to be particularly affected, if that's okay. I mean, one of the impressions of yesterday's announcement, although we saw something coming, it does feel a bit like a kick. And actually, we've seen promising steps being taken over the last few months, and suddenly we seem to have gone back 2 steps. How has it impacted on yourselves?
Yeah, for sure. So we were doing a lot of good work in preparation for October 1st. We had we've been having varying conversations with varying organisers and event organisers, exhibition organisers, conference organisers, etc. And there was a small, albeit small, sort of build-up of confidence about looking at the last quarter of the year, including the announcement on Monday. As much as we may have saw it coming over the last fortnight, it's really been a bit of a punch in the stomach for everybody. It's taken that confidence back, and really, it's all about survival now. We've been a zero revenue business since April, and clearly that hasn't helped. So we just have to continue planning as we have been, and looking for support, looking for some good news, and looking for a new start date where we can start to engage again and start planning events.
And that's one of the real frustrations, isn't it? Is all the money has been invested to get ready for the beginning of October, and then it's just seeing it kind of going back a couple of steps.
Sure. I mean, I think one of the biggest bad news stories was the boat show most recently, where that was cancelled, I think, under 24 hours notice. So you had all the organisers, exhibitors, all the paraphernalia and costs and setup that probably takes 2 to 3 months effort in situ, everyone there, and then clearly it wasn't to be. So yeah, I mean, we've had a few of those occasions. Clearly we've been caught up with it with October 1, but there are others that are clearly worse off with notice periods and sort of false start dates.
Thank you. Greg, can I bring you in at this point? How is it impacting on yourselves?
Thank you. I would agree with Kevin that I think we all saw it coming in varying degrees and realised that this was again a really important milepost. But the glib way that it was expressed by Boris yesterday was disgraceful. When you look at saying that 6 months could be the period of time, I think there's little understanding in the fact this isn't like making a restaurant booking. In the events business, there's an awful lot of pre-work, of mise en place that takes place. And if it is that it's 6 months, when are we expecting to engage again with clients? Also to come out and give such a bombshell without even saying that they are considering how they're going to support this sector is a real concern. And again, of course, it's going to mean that we're going to look to our workforce, well, at least those that are left within our workforce, and to think how we, yet again, replan for this next 6 months. So, yes, it was not a happy day yesterday.
And do you think this is a fair decision to make? I mean, do you think it really does impact? I mean, exhibitions, are they really dangerous? Conferences?
Well, no, I really don't understand from the point of view as if museums can function, if department stores can function, the IKEAs, for instance, of this world. Why can't people go to exhibitions? Why can they not have conferences? And the inconsistency for me is just incredible, in the fact that you see restaurants and bars that naturally have less in the way of planning than we do within this industry operating. I really don't understand at all, and think that this blanket cover is going to really seriously damage the business.
I see. Paul, you must feel the same way a bit, because you've just
Absolutely.
been reading notes.
Absolutely, yes. I think the challenge comes around the people that's centred around this as well. I think it's gone on an awful long time. The news that comes through continues to be bad and bad and bad. And it's fair to say that we were actually looking for some hopeful green shoots coming out for the last quarter of this year. That has very clearly been pushed into the long grass for next year now. And it's how we can continue to try and keep our workforce going, whether that be motivated, employed, or other sort of areas of the business as well. So that's really difficult. Greg's right. The inconsistency of approach for hospitality is frustrating, to say the least. Superstores, as you said, Greg, B&Q and all those sort of stores that have seen massive growth, and therefore, no doubt, massive customer base as well in those stores. I don't know where's the logic in conjunction with that and events which, from a risk assessment point of view, and systems and practices and measures that we know we put in place, because that's what we do, will far outshine some of these superstores. So yes, some frustration around that for sure.
And John, can I bring you in at this point from a Levy point of view, campus point of view? Because actually stadiums must be, it's quite hard to watch the stadiums in action sometimes, isn't it, at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, Chris, we haven't had a major event since Cheltenham Festival, which feels like a lifetime ago now. It really does. We came out of Six Nations. Obviously, Cheltenham is a busy festival, got its own coverage at the time, and had literally no revenue from major events since then, like the other people on the call. I echo the sentiment. We know that we can run events safely, albeit on reduced capacities. We've done test events at the likes of the Oval and at Edgbaston on much reduced numbers, but we know that it is safe and it's hygienic. We're treating our staff with the right protocols. We're serving the food in a manner that we know it can be achieved without any risk. But look, in the face of rising infections, I understand that the government will take a slightly different view. I'd like it to be a level playing field. I'd like us, some understanding from the government of the type and the nature of events that we put on. I think confidence is a massive thing in our industry, whether it's conference and events or whether it's returning to a sports stadium. And I think the announcements yesterday have put us back many, many months in terms of public confidence. Equally, in terms of returning to the workplace, a large part of our business in Compass is workplace catering, and same for other people on the call. And the mixed message of return to work 2 or 3 weeks ago to stay away from work today, I think is just symptomatic of the confusion that has been sowed over the many, many months, and a lack of understanding of what's needed to get us through this crisis. Ultimately, we need to batten down the hatches for the next 6 months. We'll get through it. The events industry will survive. Live sports will survive. The strongest companies will survive by treating their customers, their partners, their people in the best way. It's just going to be very, very hard.
Fair play. Andrew White, can I bring you in here from a obviously PR perspective? You've been working with a lot of the museums and venues in London. Your thoughts on all this?
Yesterday was just horrendous, full stop. There were definitely some positive thoughts out there that things were going to come back, and I think it was just a slap in the face once again. There is there just seems to be, well, there is no sort of rhyme or reason to it. People being told to work from home again proves an issue because people aren't going to have small events, and reportedly you can still have an event for 30 people. So for some smaller venues that presented positivity. But obviously being told to work from home means that companies won't necessarily put their people out to meetings and events because they'll be worried about confidence, duty of care, etc., etc. So we've really just gone backwards, I think. There's some great work that's being done by people shouting at DCMS, but I think a lot of it is, a couple of you called it the hospitality industry and a couple of you called it the events industry. And I think we really need to come under the bigger banner of the hospitality industry because there's too many factions shouting or trying to shout that aren't getting very far at the moment.
Well, that's fair. And do we need to create a more concerted effort just for the sector alone anyway, make a better marketing message?
Yeah, I think without a doubt, you know, that it's such a disparate sector with so many different, parts to it. It's really difficult, but I think this is a wake-up call, and if anything that we can do now is to pull together and really have one voice.
Thank you, Andrew. Neil, can I bring you in at this point?
Yeah, I concur with the guys, Chris. And, you know, this is a personal view, by the way, but I think we've got the health and the economic. It's out of kilter now, you know, and the industry needs a huge amount of support and help, and we hope we're going to hear something more from Rishi over the next days and weeks. You know, as John Davis said, you know, some businesses will survive, some businesses won't. I think there's been a great coming together of the hospitality industry, and with some great initiatives. You know, Food Service Circle, I think Kate Nichols has done a great job at Hospitality UK, but, you know, we are going to need more support as a sector. But I think one voice would be powerful, but everyone is trying, and we're now just back to stalemate. And the guys on this call, you know, they're all creative thinkers, entrepreneurial, strategic thinking. Sadly, we are just all having to think so short term at the moment because we've got to survive.
And isn't it how we get corporates back? Because that's obviously one of your great skill sets.
Yeah, and you know what? We will have a lag effect, as I think Kevin or Paul was saying earlier, or Greg. There'll be a huge lag effect. There's the confidence element, and will businesses be able to afford to keep doing what they've done historically? You know, in John's sector at Levy, the biggest hospitality sales company in the UK, will businesses physically be able to afford to do what they've done in the past? You know, but there are so many unknowns, and in the sectors we all work in, it's hard enough to budget and forecast at the best of times, but where do you start now?
No, fair play. Adam, can I bring you in? Obviously, you're very experienced in the sector, and now obviously doing work in the hotel sector.
I concur with what's already been said. I think it's, I think there's a real people issue here that we've got to get to grips with as well. I mean, yes, there's an awful lot of business issues, but, you know, we're coming to the end of furlough at the end of October. And the news that came out last night, which didn't really surprise me in terms of what he said, and we were already sort of getting drip fed what everyone, the predictions of what he was going to say. But it just leads to a wee bit more panic in the workforce. And I think, you know, we're already, you know, trying to sustain some pretty huge losses throughout the entirety of the businesses at the moment, and keep our workforce that we've got fairly intact and as juvenated as we possibly can, and invigorated to come back and do some bits and pieces for us. But I'm not sure the message last night would have gone down that well. I mean, you know, I've been on the phone all morning to a lot of mine, and, you know, there's definitely a sign of unrest, and it's going to take, you know, some time to sort of get through this. I think I've said it before, there's definitely still some opportunity out there, but this has been the biggest roller coaster I think I've been on in my time for the last sort of, it's just up and down. You just think you're sort of over that sort of peak, and you just suddenly thought about the next strategy, and you've, as Neil just said, you've got to rethink everything again tomorrow. And it will be the fastest thinkers that sort of get out of it, but I can't say it's not a mess at the moment. It's a mess that certainly needs a bit more unravelling. That's for sure.
So, Greg, coming to you, obviously, I mean, it's important now that government get better clarity, isn't it?
Yes, I think clarity is leadership is something that the Boris does need to learn, because we all do need clarity, and it really worries me, particularly because it reminds me of the historical moment of the Phoney War in 1939 for 8 months, where war was declared but not a shot fired. We haven't really hit the bottom yet. We haven't realised how bad this is going to be. There will be hundreds of thousands of people out of work within our hospitality industry, and that, if something doesn't happen very quickly, is going to hit hard. It breaks my heart to see people, some of our people, for instance, who are really professional, and they've learnt a profession is not just a job, and now they're stacking shelves in Waitrose, they're delivering for Argos or Next, they're retraining as plumbers. And because there's no leadership, there's no idea about when the end of this is. I mean, I totally agree with John and Neil. We will get through this, there's no doubt whatsoever. And there will be, I'm sure, the sunrise one day. But at the moment, I think that this is the pinch point. This is the really worrying point, unless Richie Sunak comes out with something tomorrow.
To try and put this in perspective, the road to recovery, how long do you think that's going to be?
Well, how do you define the road to recovery from the point of view that, as said, I'm not sure that we've hit the bottom yet, and until we hit the bottom, we don't know how and when we're going to recover. On a good day, I think we'll get back to the sort of 2019 revenues in 2023. On a bad day, I think it might be 2024, 2025. It's going to be a long, hard road to recovery, without a shadow of a doubt, because it's not only the fact that we are allowed to open and run our venues, it's the fact that the public have got to feel that there's the confidence that event bookers can book, and that their guests will actually wish to turn up and join an event. I know that there's lots of people that would like to do that today, but I think they've got to go through the experiences we've seen of going back out to shops, to going to bars, to going to restaurants, before they can get to that point, mass events. And yet again, yesterday, with curtailing until 10 o'clock in the evening, the trading time, it's just going to make people even more nervous, I feel.
Thank you, Greg. John, can I bring it to you, the question?
What, in terms of how long it'll take to recover?
Yeah, just basic.
I think when we started this, we looked at 2008 and how long the industry took to recover, and that was obviously several years. I think this is a completely different kettle of fish. I think we have to start thinking about whether it will recover in the same format and the type of events that we're used to. I think everything's going to be so different at the outset of when we get back to normal, that we have to think completely different about the style of hospitality, the style of events that we knew back in those heady days of 2019, and what actually the future will be. I think we can get back to volume levels, it just might be a completely different sales mix that we have to create. I think hospitality, in terms of people attending some of our sporting events, will change. I think companies' attitude will be more on the reward and recognition for their employees, who perhaps have been working from home for a long period of time, up to a year, let's face it. So people are going to want to get people back out and socialising in a different way. It might not be true corporate hospitality of old, but there will still be hospitality. And likewise, I think there's a huge opportunity in the conferencing market when we're allowed to get back to this, and let's hope it is in spring. Again, all these companies, all these big corporates working in isolation from home for a huge period of time, there is a missing element in terms of social interaction, in terms of networking, in terms of having a good evening out with your colleagues, that as part of the industry can help facilitate. We just have to think completely differently to the type of industry and events that we went into this crisis with. It will be completely different. I've got no doubt about that.
Look, I find it really hard to watch sport. I love sport, but try and watch sport without fans is just, to me, just the strangest experience. It must be very hard for you.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, the couple of test events we did with just two 2,500 people in the stadium. You know, the Oval can seat 20, 23, 24,000 and is actually being expanded as we speak with a new stand. It feels very strange to watch an event with just that number of people in behind closed doors. I think, you know, it just shows that these live events are certainly enhanced by the fans, if not defined by the fans. So there is a growing need, and in football we're seeing it at the start of this new season now, to get fans back into stadiums in a controlled manner. It's clearly not going to happen, I wouldn't have thought, before Christmas now. I'd like to understand from the government what the next phase of planned pilot events and test events, what does that look like? Is it going to be this side of Christmas? Is it next side of Christmas? They clearly have a definition and a timeline. Let's communicate that a little bit more openly and honestly with us so we can plan accordingly.
Well, thank you. We'll come back on that. Kevin, can I bring it into you? Because actually it must have been the strangest couple of years for you, from the kind of heady heights of the business kind of changing ownership and being a real success story to being in this situation now.
Sure, and we clearly have had conversations with our shareholder, and we're fortunate to have a supportive shareholder who've given us another injection of capital to see us through this. One thing I was going to say, just to turn it back, I went through Heathrow airport on Monday, and what really struck me was the similarities to an exhibition 4 hours, I guess. There's people milling around, bars, retail, sitting, communicating, just, we all know what an airport takes. And just looking at the volume and the size of the building compared to, a typical exhibition centre, I really struggled to see any differences at all.
I think
so,
great.
Yeah, so I mean, we clearly our arenas. We're watching the Premier League activity to see exactly how that works out. We know it's not about social distancing within the venue. It's about actually the entrance and exit of the venue and those pinch points. Conferences, I agree. We've got everything in place to manage those safely. So my point on exhibition centres, I just don't understand why we aren't able to open and trade. My view on recovery rate, probably a similar timescale to Greg's. We're hoping for FY23 to come back to maybe 70% of what FY19 was, but say on that roller coaster that was described earlier, it could easily be FY24.
That's a long one, isn't it? Paul, can I bring you in at this point?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it has been covered off, but the recovery rate is going to be so much slower than we had all hoped when potentially we were going into this in the sort of the Mays and the Junes and thinking that potentially the last quarter of 2020 was going to bounce back and some form of turnover would get our teams back into work, and that would be a real piggyback into 2021. We're not expecting any activity certainly until Q2, and we're still presuming that that's going to be extremely restricted numbers in whatever that may look like. Forecasting and budgeting for 2021, well, sounds a piece of string. Who's got a magic wand? You try and create some form of projection, but it will come to an end. And I think that's the other thing, that as leaders, we do have to remain positive. Each day comes harder sometimes, but we do have to remain positive, and it will come to an end. This is not just our life, and this is what it's going to be like. And I think you mentioned before, the ability for us to be flexible and agile and move very quickly at the point that we do come back out of this, and be creative, because actually there has been some really creative activities, virtual events. Perversely, there's been quite a few of them, and they've been great fun, and they have been successful, and we've sold some to some corporate clients, for example. Is that the future? My opinion, most definitely not. We want collaboration, network. We're humans. We want human interaction. So at the point that this bounces back, I think it will come back in quite gusto, but it will be shaped in a very different way. And as they say, we are talking about FY23, FY24. They're the sort of timelines we are talking about, getting back to the crazy hours we were working and enjoying all those mad events that are coming back on the agenda. So reality of the timelines.
Thank you, Paul. Neil, I mean, that really impacts on young people, doesn't it? I know we touched on this piece about young people, but we're talking about a 4 or 5 year recovery. And that's hard if you're trying to build a career, isn't it?
Well, it's huge, isn't it? And, you know, mental health issues and everything else, you know, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And I think one of the frustrating things that I'm sure all the guys share is that as sort of leaders, or if I'm sitting in a non-exec role working with boards, you know, one of the things we've always tried to do across the businesses I'm involved with is communicate frequently and clearly. But it's very hard to do when you're not getting clear messages from government. And I think from what came out last night, you know, how do we begin to communicate that to our staff and our teams and our team members? So, you know, that's really hard. But, you know, it's almost going to be half a generation, isn't it? You know, whether it's education or people in the workplace, apprentices or whatever, no one can know what the impact of that is going to be like down the line, Chris. But it, you know, is seriously concerning. And I guess about sort of future revenues and getting back to the, you know, the halcyon days of 2019, I guess the single biggest change in that is going to be a vaccine. And as and when that might happen, and that, you know, from a confidence perspective, then you've got to overlay it with the, you know, economic side of things, and, you know, who will be able to afford what. And you look at, you know, sporting bodies as an example, you know, and historically, if you looked at a venue or a rights holder, media would be there, or TV and media would be their top revenue stream, then commercial partnerships, then hospitality and ticketing. You know, it's their third biggest revenue stream has gone. So, you know, and I'm including catering in the hospitality bit, obviously. So is this going to change how we as caterers work commercially with rights holders and venues? What's that going to look like down the line? You know, there's so much of a ongoing impact that this is going to have. But as I said earlier, you know, we've got to look to the future, but it's so much about managing today.
Well, you make a very valid point. I mean, this whole bit about trust, I mean, it's interesting that the government, I think, had trust in March, and that seems completely evaporated now. And everyone is openly critical of where we've got to, which is probably the first time I've known such a situation when so much has evaporated. Isn't it? Is that fair?
I think, you know, if it was for me, to me, Chris, that question, I think it was almost inevitable that, you know, when 6 months ago Boris said what he said, and it was very clear about shutdown. In my world, or my feeling about it, I think that's the only clear message we've had from government: stay home. You know, the rest of it, there's so much ambiguity around all of the statements that we then have to take away and try and digest, and what that means to our business and our teams and everything else. So I think it's almost inevitable anyone will lose confidence of the government in this situation, because, you know, what Vallance and Whitty said on Monday, that was just teeing up what Boris said last night. You know, so, and that's my point, where I now think that the health and economic balance is way out of kilter now.
Okay, thank you. Adam, can I bring you to this point?
Yeah, I mean, you know, because I'm working in sort of two sectors at the moment, and certainly in the hotel side of things. I mean, speaking to the guys that we're with, you know, they're thinking the likes of the 2019 figures won't come back until late 21, if not 22. So they're almost knocking out most of next year in the nicest sense. That said, though, what sort of encourages me is that they're still looking at a sort of a 50, maybe 60% occupancy. From our perspective, if they can get a 50 or 60% occupancy, we've still got a fairly good footfall coming through that door that we can service. It's interesting what all the guys say, and I think it's similar for the hotel sector at the moment. They're having to rethink their model. You know, they've almost had it on a plate in the nicest sense. They've had reasonably good spaces where they've done events, and it's been probably quite easy to juggle around the ADR to get the right price point to get everything sorted. And now they're having to rethink their entire packages, and I think that's going to be a case. And I'm seeing it different from Manchester through to London. I mean, London's been a very, very slow start, and still slow. But, you know, yesterday I was in London, 3 restaurants in close proximity to where I am. I went into all 3 at lunchtime, you know, high profile places, suited people, they were doing at least 40 covers at lunch each. So, within a space of like 200 yards, there was 150 people out yesterday spending some seriously big money. So, as much as, and I think it was Paul that said it, we've got to keep positive on some of these things. That there is a lot of negative vibes that are out there. There's a lot of negatives that are coming through. It's just going to be tough, and I think we've got to try and do our best as a group of people to pull those key messages through. And I know it's not easy, and I think and we're all probably battling against the same arguments and the same discussions, and we wake up every morning going through the same sort of thing at this moment in time. It's certainty we need, strategy and clarity, absolutely 100%. And I think, it's, just to give you a prime example, this morning, there's still uncertain clarity about if you're in a hotel and the bar shuts at 10 o'clock, does that mean everybody doesn't get a drink? Or if you're a resident, can they have a drink? And they just don't know, because the hotel doesn't know whether that bar has got to shut at 10 and whether the residents can still have a drink, or whether they've got to take a drink to their room. I mean, whenever they come up with these things, there's always a little bit of grey area that's just left. And then we're the ones that are sat trying to decipher it. And it would just be a lot better, I think, for all of us if some of the thought processes, which I don't totally disagree with, but they just got to map them out better. And as John said, be far more honest. I think we're always waiting for them to say something. They've got to be more honest with us as a group of individuals now and tell us what's going on.
Andrew, bringing you in here. Obviously, questions about who should be leading this fight, the UK hospitality or someone else, and how do we get the messaging right about the industry itself?
So there is a campaign specifically for the event industry, which has been crowdfunded, called One Industry Voice, which is trying to pull everybody together so that there is one voice that will approach government. And I think that is probably the best way to go forward. If you look at today, the stuff that people are putting out, the MIA are doing really fantastic information, but it is everybody fighting their own corner, because it could be a venue finder versus the the AV companies. It's just so disparate, and I think that's why we absolutely need the one focus. And if that could feed into hospitality and that there was better relationships, then that's the way to go forward, without a doubt.
Greg, thank you, Andrew. Greg, coming back to you. I mean, when we spoke last week, one of the points you made very validly, this isn't just about the event sector, is it? This is actually how it impacts on other sectors.
I think that it does spill over into other event sectors. If you take charities, having charity dinners, it's the one big fundraiser for them, and with their auctions and everything else, all of that has been put on hold. And I know it's been incredibly damaging for them. If you look at the sector of museums, again, where in most cases it is that people come in and don't pay anything to be there, renting out those spaces, the catering commission, the commission on all the other items is incredibly important to them. And then things like awards dinners too, that for very large publishing companies, where things have now gone online and print has disappeared, this is often where they earn their money. This is the difference between making money and not. So many of those, and we do an awful lot of them, have been put on hold until next year. But then, of course, they're worried about what are they going to celebrate next year when they're doing awards, because there won't have been trade in many cases, not in all. So I think it is that it spills over into other aspects of life, not just us in the hospitality industry.
Neil, your thoughts on this? Because I know you're involved right across a number of industries on this.
Yeah, I echo Greg's view completely about charity, which, a lot of people say we've had a bit of charity fatigue over the last 6 months. But yeah, it's another area and sector that's been massively hit. And I do chair a company that works with corporates on their charitable fundraising, either for their own foundations, trusts, or designated charities. And the vast majority of that, sadly, is around people at events, and it has just gone. And there's only so much you can do with sort of online events, etc., but that's only picking up maybe 5%, 10% max, I would suggest, in my experience, of that opportunity. And it's far-reaching, isn't it? The whole supply chain and everything else.
So, Paul, I mean, obviously, CSC has obviously got fantastic venues all across the country, but you very much appeal to the corporate market. Is that fair? I mean, the corporate market is the one which is going to struggle probably most to come back.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you may have seen that on Monday we opened up the last 2 retail restaurants and bars, only to then be met with the news on Tuesday, which was a bit character building to say the least. But we're staying strong and we're keeping them open. They're iconic locations, so that by default actually has seen that we're seeing more people use it as a treat location as opposed to the corporate expectation at lunchtime. So a lot of that has moved into early suppers, which is good. It's nowhere near the revenue we need to survive in those locations, but at the same time, we do need to get them open to help demonstrate. I mean, you know, that talking about and do we operate safe environments? You know, we do food safety. We've gone through the allergen process. We risk assessed everything when it comes to events and all those sort of activities. So the COVID is just another layer of requirements that is what we do. We're the experts, and we can clearly demonstrate that we've got absolutely safe environments for people to enjoy, whether that be events or even just the retail side of things. But yeah, definitely the corporate piece is going to be a bit of a hole for us, but we have seen, you know, dare I say, a big afternoon tea trade, getting into a bit of a detail, but an afternoon tea trade has grown tenfold in the last couple of months. So we're hanging on to all those little bits of revenue, but they are quite positive at the moment. So
that's interesting. And is the afternoon tea from business executives, or is it more the consumers generally?
So what we're finding is it's the consumers actually. So, you know, Gherkin was historically a corporate lunch and stroke dinner environment. We decided we're putting afternoon tea on there, and 50% of the revenue is coming through is now afternoon tea, because either they never could have it or they could just spend a different experience. And the other thing is, people want to treat themselves at the moment. They have been locked up and they do want to treat themselves at the moment. And I appreciate we're talking about the retail side of things, but we are seeing you know, reasonable revenue coming through. Nothing like what we experienced of last year, but certainly stuff coming through, which is helpful.
That's showing a positive sign. Thank you. Adam, obviously a number of questions being asked about drinking and bad behaviours. And I'm not asking that about you, but it's more about, are we seeing, is this a real major issue? Are you seeing this?
It's an interesting one. I mean, it's, you know, without going into too much detail on this, you know, we are seeing a shift in pattern at the moment in terms of hotel guests, and you're seeing a younger crowd take up the sort of the more lucrative offers at the moment that the hotels are putting on, and a little bit like Paul said, treating themselves, but then once they're there, they're then stopping on their way through at Tesco's or Sainsbury's with a bag full of booze and making sure they have a really good night of it. But which, you know, isn't what we're about, and it isn't what, you know, some hotels are about. I think, you know, there's a balance, I think, and there is still people out there wanting the experiences. There's still people wanting us to pay for a good meal out, and they do want to go out and enjoy it and be. And they want to feel safe. And I think that's probably the bigger message. So we're seeing, you know, luckily, touch wood, you know, we haven't had any totally bad behaviour, but we are seeing certainly, you know, a few of the younger generation come in and certainly drink quite a bit and get or come in already drunk to then want more to carry on the evening, which, you know, we've had to say sort of no to. But, you know, overall, I think it's, you know, you see it in different sectors, in different places. I mean, Manchester's, you know, a prime location for, you know, going out in the evening and having a good time. And, you know, we're not far off the back of Deansgate. So, you know, we're in a prime position, and, you know, you see a lot of it going on there. Whereas, you know, London, we're in a completely different, distinct type area where, you know, we're probably not as prevalent to that as others are.
Thank you for that. Kevin, one of the questions from David Reed which is very fair, is that obviously the government keep talking about it's being driven by the science, but some of the forecasts I think were a bit interesting. Isn't it time we challenge the science a bit more, or challenge the government on their scientific bits a bit harder? Because I mean, obviously all the feedback is negative at the moment. Everyone's feeling punched in the stomach. Isn't it time we start challenging that science a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think to be honest, we should challenge everything all the time anyway. I mean, I think a good, healthy challenge usually results in a better result and a better conclusion. There's always pockets. I'm going back to sort of Adam's point. You know, there's always pockets through society. You're always going to get a few bad behaved, and you're always going to get a few overly compliant, and you know, the majority sort of sit in the middle. So I don't see that's particularly changed. I can see the demographic changing, where people have got a little bit more confidence because of the stats that are coming out about certain ages and certain ethnic backgrounds, etc. But I suppose as venue owners, we want to put on events. We know event organisers want to put on events. It's just the attendance, and it's that confidence level. And with the confusion, the mixed messaging, the U-turns, which I sort of understand, you know, it is a crisis that we've never faced before, so it is a learning process. But until we can really start to put down some firm sort of milestones on this, and whether it's challenging the science or actually being consistent, we aren't going to get that consumer attendance confidence up until you've got that sort of level. No one's going to commit money. No one's going to start putting these events back on track. So unfortunately, it is going to be sort of delayed and deferred, and, you know, kicked into the long grass, as someone said earlier, and probably does look like the beginning of next year. But what we need to do is having that one consistent voice as a sector, going to a consistent place within government, and, as you say, challenging the messaging, challenging the science, so we got a little bit of consistency running through the core of everything that we're going to face, because there will be changes, there will be new forms of information that come out ahead of us. I think we react very well to those, but there should be some core things that are sort of carved in stone, I think.
That's fair. Greg, your thoughts on this? Should we be challenging harder, making a stronger message?
Yeah, I'm involved in the One Industry, One Voice, and have been from the early part of it, and do believe that we've got to find our voice. We absolutely must, because we are forgotten, totally forgotten. I can't help thinking I'd love to be a restaurateur at this moment, as I was in previous years, to be in a position where we just cannot work, we're not allowed to work, is untenable. And somehow we've got to make sure that our voice is heard. We've got to lobby government, and we've got to make sure there's some support within our sector, and it needs to come quickly.
Andrew? Andrew, you still here?
I think One Industry Voice is the way forward, because there are many separate associations approaching and sort of shouting out, but I think if it could be done under one banner, then that is without doubt the best way to go. And it has been crowdfunded to a hell of to a big extent. So by the looks of it, it's ready to go. And I think we just need to consolidate that voice and really push forward.
We want to go to really ask a few questions about yourselves at this point. John, I'm going to ask you a very unfair question, which has been come from the audience, I'm afraid, which is, how do you cope with pressures from your shareholders during this time? But actually, I also wanted to touch base really how this whole period of time has affected you as leaders and how it's changed you. John, can I start with you on that one?
I think the first element of that was asking about shareholders. To be fair, Compass board, both at group level with Dominic and at UK level with Robin, have been extremely supportive of Levy. We've had some very good years in recent history, and they don't forget that. They don't forget the benefits that we brought to the wider business over the last decade, really. And it's been a growth business, not just for Levy, but the whole industry. Sports and hospitality, major events has had some very good years post 2008. When there was a dip, it came back 2011, 2012, and it's been in growth ever since then. So in terms of the group, it's been very, very supportive. Obviously, we've had to take action. We've had to look at restricting costs as much as we can, treating our people as fairly as we can. But in terms of what business is realistically going to be there when we return, and taking a view on that. How do I personally deal with it? I mean, I think the stress, and I'm sure the panel will share it, the real stress is the responsibility of all the people that work for us, because we have an awful lot of people earning not very much in terms of amounts of money, who work seasonally, who work at events, who work for multiple different jobs, multiple different companies even. And if there are no events, if there are no business there, we are pushing many thousands of people below the breadline. And that is the hidden cost of this, and the hidden outcome of this. And I think that does need to be weighed up in when we look at the health risks. There are health risks to what we're doing to a generation of people, young people coming into this industry, young people that work in this industry, but equally people, middle-aged people who have worked on the circuit for many, many years, chefs that work on the circuit and have done for many, many years, that all of a sudden there is no work for them. So we have to be creative as best we can. In Levy, we've tried to repurpose, we've tried to find work in other company sectors. We've worked within healthcare a lot. We've got a big healthcare team under Menirest, and we've been very supportive of our colleagues there. But there's only so much you can do, and there's only so much work around at the moment. It's very, very tough. So mentally, for us, it's making sure we're doing the very best we can to support our people. And can I look myself in the mirror at the end of this? Can I look my daughters in the eye and say, we did our best to try and support the industry and save as many jobs as we could? And currently, I'm proud to say we can say that. It's just going to, it's going to carry on being very, very tough for the next 5 to 6 months.
Yeah, no, fair play. Paul, can I ask the same question of you?
Sure. I have to echo what John says. Absolutely. No, hospitality is a people business, and that is the forefront of everything we do, and how we are treating our teams, how we are communicating to them is fundamental. We have all sadly lost some unbelievably fantastic people in the nature of what we've had to do. And that is difficult to cope with, day in and day out. I said before, we have to remain positive. And the big thing for me is we will come out of it. We will survive. We're doing this to keep the business going, to enable us to then employ these people when we bounce back again. So, we have to bear that in mind. It does, you do have difficult days, and having time to talk to the teams, spending quality time just talking about them as people, as opposed to the wider challenges that sit there, is also very important. But yeah, it's a difficult time, and it's gone on a damn sight longer than we ever thought. And we sit here today thinking, crikey, we've still got 6 months to go. It's 3 months to Christmas, and we've potentially got another 3 months as well. And we have to keep going and find those little snippets of opportunity, whatever they might be, and just make sure that we celebrate them when they do come through.
How's it changing you?
15 now is a great celebration for us. Amazing, isn't it? That events for 15 is now a celebration. But that's the nature we're in at the moment. So that has to be the focus. So yeah.
How's it changed you?
I think this whole situation is interesting because we've all been in it. I think previously, if it's in isolation, you sometimes question your ability and your skill and your direction of taking a business. But actually, this is all of us in it together. I've spent a lot more time talking to colleagues and friends to validate that maybe how I'm feeling is just like everyone else is feeling, and then I feel a little bit better. So, the communication piece across all levels, for me, has been important. I completely and utterly miss the human interaction. That's the piece that I struggle with an awful lot, but know that will come back at some stage. And like all of us, I think we need to have our escape. I cycle. I do a lot of walking around when I'm in London. I prefer to walk and do calls and and do those sort of things, but you need to have a bit of me time as well, and I think that's the important thing.
Thank you. Kevin? You've answered the shareholder piece, I guess, earlier. But...
Yeah, so we're fortunate to have Blackstone as our majority shareholder. They're clearly showing patience and showing some commitment, which is great. I echo what everyone else said. I mean, I've always believed that, you know, our biggest and largest asset is always our team. The challenge and the stress I'm feeling is about how do I preserve that team? How do I maintain that team? And how do I give that team a sense of purpose? So we're looking at diversifying revenue streams. You know, we've been fortunate enough to set up a Nightingale Hospital throughout this from sort of early April. So we've had small snippets of activity. We've done a couple of events, a golf event up in Scotland, etc., with no spectators, but with players and media, etc. A couple of our regional venues have opened, so we've got a couple of zoos and a couple of visitor attractions that are sort of trading, and they're trading well. So where we're able to, we're doing okay. It gives us a bit of stability and a bit of normality. We need to keep communicating that. I've always known my deficit of being photogenic. I've never done so many videos in my life for my team. And watching those videos, it just realizes I've got a face only a mother can love. But I think it's at the basis of everything. It's all about communication. You can't communicate enough. I think that sincerity drives that trust. I suppose one of the biggest learning things for me, and again, I don't know whether it's about my age or even maybe my attitude, but I was never an advocate for working from home. I tried to influence it within my team and teams, and actually having done it now for 6 months and seeing what we can do and how we can deliver, it's totally opened my eyes to actually being less of that sort of mindset, being a bit more open to a bit more flexible to how people want to work and how we can work and the results we can get. And I suppose, as everyone else is thinking on this call, you know, just echoing how fortunate we are to have the people in our teams that we have. I mean, looking at how they've bounced back, how they've been resilient, how they've been upbeat, how they've grasped some of these unique and challenging opportunities and just dealt with it.
Which leads me on to the next question. I'll just keep you on this, Kevin, for a second. A question from Annie Dunning is about furlough. Will furlough be extended, do we think?
I'm hopeful there will be a son of furlough for specific sectors. I'd like to think we are one of those sectors, because of basically government enforcing us not being able to trade and not being able to open our doors. There has to be some sort of support. I mean, I think furloughs worked brilliantly. If you look how generous and how well it's worked for the UK across Europe, I mean, it's been brilliant. You know, it's never, you know, those sort of figures and those sort of volumes have never been seen before. And I think the termination of it at the end of October is probably appropriate for the majority of sectors who are and have been trading. I just think we need to get a bit more support for those specific sectors that are still hindered or not allowed to trade. And if that continued support is necessary to, again, just to keep that team and the teams involved, just maintaining those teams within the industry. Otherwise, they will be going out, looking to jump sectors, probably taking backward steps, etc.
Thank you, Kevin. Greg?
Yeah, well, it's a question that's asked by staff, and one of the most challenging things that I think I've had is that the staff, of course, expect us to have answers, expect us to have a real view of what's going to happen. Of course, we've got no more view than anybody else. But I think if we're not going to lose this hospitality, this event sector, there has to be some support. I think that needs to be in terms of grants towards rent and rates and furlough. And you know, to echo some of the guys' points earlier, the most valuable asset any of us have is our staff, and we need to preserve as much as we possibly can. We promised every single member of our staff that we will offer them their job back before we offer a job to anybody else, and we'll stick with that. but this is the most important moment, as said. Going through these last months, I think the government have supported businesses that really didn't need this at all, and have now found themselves in a position where they really don't effectively have much more to offer. But if they don't support, I think it could be very difficult. I'm very hopeful that they will.
Thank you. Andrew, can I bring you in at this point?
I'm hopeful that they will, and it was raised after the Prime Minister spoke yesterday. So Jason McCartney, who's the MP for Colne Valley, specifically mentioned the events industry and what would be done for it, and the ancillary supply chain. And Boris's typical answer was that Rishi would do something creative with it. So it's certainly on the agenda, and I think we can only keep pushing and questioning so that we can get some kind of extension of furlough or grants, as Greg says. So I'm hopeful.
We've spoken quite a lot during this period, Andrew, over the last 6 months, haven't we? And you've been through quite a roller coaster yourself. How have you found this whole period?
To be honest, the day that lockdown came in, I had 26 clients phone and said, "That's it. We don't need your services anymore." So my business basically hemorrhaged from day one. I fell out of every single piece of sort of grant that was available because I'm not hospitality sector, despite the fact that I was reliant on it. I tried to prove that and have got absolutely nowhere. So as a business, I've had a really difficult time. It was supposed to be the 21st birthday of Triggerfish, and it's been pretty horrendous. However, there are opportunities out there, and looking at it in a completely different way, just looking at what digital's doing and how people are sort of working and how to communicate nowadays. We've changed completely how the business works. The team is a lot smaller. I was fortunate that I had people who were already leaving the company, so I didn't have to do anything with them. But, you know, we're a small company. Everyone works from home now. Presenteeism in the office is completely gone. So I think people are happier. From a personal perspective, I think, well, I'm hope that I'm a kind of boss now, or I try to be. But it certainly made me think, you know, if you can do a job and you can do a great job and you don't have to do it from a 9 to 5 timeline, then great, good on you. So that's really how it's affected me.
Thank you. That's right, Candice. One of the concerns, Andrew, is about venues. And actually, can they survive? They're losing 2.3 million on average. They must be quite close to the line anyway.
Yeah.
As well. I mean, the real concern here is how many venues and stadia, I guess, John, if we come on to you in a minute as well, will go bust.
So the larger venues that are reliant on the 500s and the dinner that Greg was talking, you know, the dinners that are just the lifeblood of the business, you know, it's a major issue to them. Yeah, they can switch on meetings for 30 people, but there's a finite amount of people that are going to have things for 30 people. And the reality is people don't want to host anything in London at the moment. So anything rural, anything with open space is absolutely flying because it's what people are looking for. And, you know, reboot your sort of company culture, go away, do team builds. So that market is flying. And I think what we've seen is a huge transition from business in the centre of town to rural locations. We're 6 months behind again. Yeah, it's just a nightmare for them. The museums, you know, they're all aware that they're looking at 30 people. They've also got the massive issue of actually the amount of footfall that they have in the day. Then they've got to explain to a corporate, you know, yes, we've had 2,000 people through, but we're clean and we're COVID proof, etc., etc. It doesn't put much confidence in the corporate's mind. And I think that's the big issue is getting over to them that these places are clean and safe. And I think that's where the rurals are really picking up, really, really benefiting.
Thank you, Andrew. John, so stadiums, there must be a real concern, isn't it?
It's especially the smaller clubs who, you know, all the lower league clubs where the TV revenues, the commercial deals are a lot smaller. I think, you know, in terms of having an industry voice, I think actually a lot of the sporting bodies have come together, and there was a letter to the government yesterday that set this out, that support and monies do need to go to clubs. That there is a real risk of clubs going under, whether it's in leagues 1 and 2 of the Football League, domestic rugby clubs, rugby league clubs. There's a lot of sports that are on a knife edge at the moment, and a lot of sports that rely on paying customers to turn up and attend these matches, whether it's general admission or hospitality. But that's not to say there's this misconception that Premier League clubs have enough money to carry on ad infinitum. It's not true. Yes, they have a lot of money. Most of it goes out on players' wages. So those players still need to be paid, and they've got a lot of commitments in terms of the stadiums that they have built, the teams that they're trying to keep employed, and the lack of match day revenues is still a big piece of the pie. I think Bill Sweeney at the RFU has been very open publicly talking about that and the effect on grassroots rugby if we don't get more paying customers back into Twickenham, and that there is a clear delineation or link between a hospitality guest at Twickenham and money going to grassroots rugby. And I don't think we'd be naive to think that there wasn't. This is the money that pays for grassroots sports. So we do need to see, a transition or a way back. I think we're all sitting here on the call today waiting for more announcements from the government. Yes, we can campaign. Yes, we can push. But yes, ultimately, I think that the pressure's already there from a sporting side. There needs to be a fund available similar to the one that was given to the arts and the arts relief that came a couple of months ago. And the furlough scheme, my gut feel is that they won't carry on with it as it exists currently, but they'll have to come up with a version, whether it's a wage top-up. There's a lot of people that we could bring back into the business on a part-time basis if there was a wage top-up to keep them, to make sure they could pay their bills and they had at least the majority of their salary covered. And I think there's similar schemes on the continent have worked.
German scheme, isn't it?
In Germany, in France. So I'd like to think the government are looking hard at that, and it seems to be a lot of pressure growing around those schemes. So I'm hopeful that in a week or two's time we'll get some more clarity.
Neil, can I bring you in? Thank you, John.
There's sport and there's sport, and the slight misconception or perception rather of the Premier League. But I think even if you look within Premier League, clubs are impacted in different ways. Tottenham, where John's business operates, more reliance on match day revenues for the side, with the stadium, with somewhere like Chelsea as an example. So they're all different in their needs. I think the one for me is very close to my heart, Chris, as you know, is cricket. Because ECB is running cricket, but it doesn't own any venues. And historically, venues have paid the ECB to host international cricket, but that's now been flipped on its head during COVID, and ECB have been paying the Ageas Bowl and Emirates Old Trafford to host international cricket. Will those commercial terms continue into the future? Who only knows? You look at Formula One, Silverstone hosting those back-to-back races. Ordinarily, Stuart Pringle will be paying a fortune to host F1. He's actually getting paid by Formula One. So how all that, unravels as we go forward, no one knows at the moment. And I've got a great friend of mine who owns a legal practice that does a lot of work in sport. And I've been chatting to him on and off over various things around, you must be absolutely right in the thick of it at the moment, with rights holders suing TV companies, suing commercial partners, suing contract caterers. And he went, we're not seeing any of that yet. Because the bottom line to all of this, it is no one's fault. It is no one's fault that we're in this position. And that, it's not comforting because we are where we are. So I think as society and as an industry, I think, we've come together really very, very well. I think the communication has been far more empathetic. I think there are far more frenemies now, I think they call them, than there's ever been in the past, and long may that continue. And I think what we might see coming out of this is just a slightly different way of doing business. I'm clearly speculating. I have no real foundation for that, but we've got to get to that point first, haven't we? We've got to protect our people as best we can. Keep working with our clients and our customers and the consumer to just do the best we can. But we need help from government. We absolutely need help from government.
Thank you, Neil. Adam?
Which question, Chris?
Well, I mean, you've obviously done. We've done. Let's do the furlough one and actually the sporting stadiums one and venues one, because it must be you've been involved in that sector. The most of them are quite close anyway.
Well, furlough, I echo the comments from the others. I'm seriously hoping that there will be something coming along the way. I don't think it's going to be vast, but I'm hoping it's going to be enough so that we can, you know, plod on a little bit longer. I think this whole thing about the next 6 months, there has to be, well, I say there has to be, there doesn't have to be, but it would be nice that something is put on the table that enables our businesses to survive with the people element. I mean, you know, just trying to wrap this up into, you know, my own journey over the last 3 years, you know, I feel, you know, a bit like what John was saying, I feel a huge responsibility at the moment being, you know, an owner of the people that I've got on board, because, you know, I want to make sure that they do have a life and that they've got their mortgages looked after and they've got their holidays sorted for next year and so on and so forth. So there's an awful lot on that side of it that's going on. And I think furlough will help. And I think it's really now the clarity on that needs to come out, because everybody knows in theory it sort of stops at the end of October. So there's definitely, you know, some very nervous staff out there at the moment and employees that we're looking after that are seriously thinking, well, what happens at the end of October? So that side of it needs to happen. I think from the sporting sector, and I'm still in touch with quite a few of the guys out there, yeah, it's tough for them. You know, and John's right. You know, you know, even the biggest stadiums, the wage bills alone are quite horrendous, and they've still got that element to. And whereas they, you know, respectfully required the event side of things within any stadium, and non-match day to sort of get them through, match day was a little bit of extra cash that sort of came on the top of it, and that sort of made the whole 365 business work. I'm sure, and I don't have this for fact, I'm sure there will be some very, very nervous chairmen at the moment across the piece, whether it's in football or cricket or whatever, that have ploughed an awful lot of their own personal wealth into a lot of these venues that are now seeking to look to see how they can pull that back. There will be some others, I'm sure, that will be able to ride this out for the next 18 months. And they will have surplus cash that they can call upon to get through. But it, you know, it's the lower leagues, and if the lower leagues suffer, then, you know, everything suffers from schooling onwards, because then you don't see any of the grassroots in any type of sport come up through and then end up where we'd all be starting to watch them. It's you know, I was watching the interview this morning about Tyson, you know, and about the boxing match. You know, his view was, you know, we can still box and we can box behind closed doors, but it's going to be a pretty awful boxing match, you know, because we absolutely rely on the activity and the participation of the spectators to help us get sort of geared up and get going. So, you know, it's a tough one, Chris.
Thank you, Greg. Coming on to stadiums, because I know you're actively, isn't this? How does it reinvent itself now? How do stadiums and events now reinvent themselves? Because it is going to be worked out.
Yeah, I mean, we're involved in several sporting events from Lords to Royal Ascot and Grand Prix and several others, but probably not as much as some of the rest of the guys are. So I probably haven't got as much of an opinion. But as a venue owner and an operator, and we're involved in several other venues that we don't own. Our partnerships have been great. They've been incredibly empathetic and supportive towards us. Would we repurpose and try and reimagine? The answer for me, but it might not be the answer for everybody, would be no. The reason being that the business model would just not work, mostly because they're temporary venues or fairly temporary. So I think we would wait it out for the right sort of business to come back. And I think it was John that was saying earlier, and I concur completely, conferences are bound to be the first thing that comes back. Our sales mix will change, and we need to really be driving towards that. All businesses need to communicate to their staff. If they're going to drive their culture, if they're going to tell people what's happening, whether it's good, bad or indifferent, they're going to need conferences. and we will, without a doubt, be pushing very hard towards that, possibly putting more in the way of production values in, so that the buy-in is easier for clients. But I can see that coming back, I hope, in the first quarter of next year, if we're allowed, and if not, certainly the second quarter. As far as furlough, by the way, is concerned, we've got some Dutch guys that we work with and shortly about to go into partnership with, and they told me over there that they're being supported for 2 years by the government. That's incredible. I don't know that for a fact, but I believe this guy, and I know that in Germany and in other countries as well, there's an awful lot more that's happening. I think, you know, when it immediately happened with Richie Sunak, we were all thrilled. Well, I certainly was, because I didn't think there was that much money in the world. I couldn't see how it could be possible they could support as they did. I don't think it'll be furlough as said now, but I think there will be something.
It's interesting about your conferences coming back first. I would have thought the real appetite was for dinners and people coming together again.
I think that, you know, when I say, well, I still think conferences will be the way, but I think dinners or staff events will be very important too, particularly if it is that going forward some people are working remotely. And if that is the case, again, if you're going to drive a culture within a business, you've got to bring those people together. So I do think there'll be some events like that, but I do think that members of staff will also be very much influenced by their family members. In the short term, to convince someone to go to a conference, a business style of event that can be very easily controlled and without dancing, without large amounts of alcohol, I can see people being much more confident about letting their loved ones go back to events more quickly than I can do with dinners. I'm sure the dinners will come back. In actual fact, I can see that the appetite is very much there, because people that may have put them off this year have in actual fact just put them off until next year. They don't want to not do this. They just can't do it at this moment.
Fair play. John?
The type of events that will come back. I mean,
well, partly, but also, how about venues repurposing themselves? Are events reinventing themselves, or is it just the same?
I think hospitality and sporting venues needs to exist in terms of it still needs to be premium. People still need to pay the ticket price. I think there'll be a stronger drive to informality. That was happening pre-crisis anyway. And I think, like a lot of things, everything will just be speeded up, and how that comes to pass. I think who comes into premium hospitality, are they there with their friends and colleagues rather than corporate clients or entertaining? I think that might be a slight change in the mix. Obviously, the style of catering is going to change. You know, I think obviously, and it's been well documented, buffets and canapes and chef's tables and carvery stations, I think, have to be rethought in the short term. But there's lots and lots of ways you can still do premium informal, and there's lots of ways, and there'll still be a market for the a la carte premium as well at the very top of the tiering pyramid. In terms of the GA experience in stadiums, there is already a pressure, and there was, as we started to think we were going to get fans back in the stadium from October the 1st, to use outdoor space as much as possible. And if I can just put my campaigning hat on again, this surely is the time that we allow football fans to drink in the bowl of the stadium. I think it's absolutely ridiculous that we're still treating people like animals that can't behave themselves. We should be treating people with respect, and then they will act with respect. And if it's safer to drink in the bowl, which it undoubtedly is in terms of closed indoor spaces versus outdoor spaces, that is a message that's coming back from my client base direct to the Premier League, and the Premier League are lobbying the government on that basis. And that's a legislative change that dates back to the Troubles from the 1980s. And surely we've moved on in 2020 to start thinking about things like that very differently. In terms of, can a stadium reinvent itself for a completely different purpose? Well, no, obviously. We need sport back. Live sport is intertwined with the cultural fabric of this country. Whoever your team is, whoever your sport is, it's often the thing you most feel passionately about. Personally, there's nothing like watching the Welsh rugby team for me, and seeing them live is like no other experience, in terms of the sporting calendar, and watching my football team Everton play live. You can't replicate that experience by watching it on TV. You can't replicate it by watching it online. and every single person pretty much has their own passion and they'll want to get back inside. So we don't need to reinvent, we just need to reboot and get on with it. Once we're through this next period, whether it's 3 months or 6 months, the demand will be there. And the thing we haven't talked about is the pent-up demand. There's a huge pent-up demand when it's unleashed. We've seen this with staycations over summer. We saw it with the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. It's not, if people are allowed out and they feel safe when they come out, there is a huge demand. And international travel, I think, is going to be restricted or compressed for a number of years. Maybe might take a decade for international travel to get back to what it once was. Therefore, people are going to be looking for experiences domestically a lot more, and we're very well placed to be able to deliver that, whether that's in the sports or events sector.
That's fair, and a good start to Everton as well this season.
Let's start for like 20 years, Chris. It's unbelievable.
Lucky they started.
And Neil, sorry, do you see a different picture of events coming out of this?
I think there is an inevitability, Chris, that things will be different from the environment. I think John is absolutely right. There will be a pent-up demand for people wanting to go back to live sport. It's only a subjective view because it can't be anything other than that at the moment. And having worked in hospitality at sporting events for 30 years from my career, I do have a nagging suspicion that could change. And venues, stadia, which everyone on this call I'm sure has seen evolve over the years. I just wonder whether we will get back to the sheer volume of hospitality that there was pre-COVID. I really do worry about that, but I don't know. We'll just have to see how demand is, how the corporate world is, whether they've got the money to do it, etc., etc. There no doubt will be hospitality there. People will always pay a premium. Corporates will always pay a premium, but how many of them will be physically able to do it and to be able to afford to do it, I just don't know. But I think what it does do, and I'm sure all the guys in their businesses, what this industry actually is so much better at than it was 10 years ago is understanding what our consumers want. If you go back 15 years, we made so many assumptions as an industry that punters would want X, Y, and Z, but actually we do listen now. So I think a lot of that inevitably will dictate what it looks like in the future.
Thank you. Paul, can I bring you to this point?
Sure.
You've got so many different venues. Are you looking at things differently?
Yeah, I think I don't think it's going to be drastically differently. I think it's more around how we have continued to evolve the offers, the food, the drink, the way events operate. I think it will just continue to evolve, if I'm honest. Technology possibly may play a greater part in that. Technology has been a lifeline to enable us to connect to our clients, our staff, and our teams over this last 5 months. So how that plays a part going forward, I think there is something that's for that. But I think it's just more around how it evolves, how we also look at the food offering. I'm going to drum on about the afternoon tea, but we took a punt up at Gherkin to put afternoon tea on, and it kind of worked. And there's all these mad ideas that we need to be thinking about. And as Neil said, I do strongly believe that we are listening to our consumer much, much more now, and we are most definitely looking at the way that we operate and being more informed to do that as well, which we haven't had so much in the past.
I do wonder if people look at service differently after this.
It's interesting actually, because when shops started to put people at the front door to assist them for the number of people coming in, by default, actually, you felt like you had a better service going into shop. So I think there is definitely a greater engagement from service during COVID that people have got used to. I think people have had to communicate with customers much, much more. And in some cases, ask difficult questions or manage difficult situations that they never had before. In some cases where they're manually taking details for track and trace, for example, and all those sort of activities. And therefore, I think, the service has definitely improved and been more considerate with regards to people's feeling and the way that they operate in the spaces that they're at. I think that will continue. I think that's been helpful for sure, definitely.
That's really interesting. Look, we're down to our last few minutes. So just final question to all of you. Paul, I'll start with you as you obviously in the lineup. If you had one wish, what would it be now? You could do one thing, see one thing happen.
Wow, that's a loaded question, isn't it? I mean, like everything, I'd love the business to come back with gusto sooner rather than later. My great desire would be is that we do get some activity in December. I think I'm scraping at a very slim opportunity there, but something this year would be great, or some sort of activity. And more importantly, I just can't wait to be around my team again. I think in person. That's that's the key thing. That's what we do. We work together and solve problems and create problems that way. So that would be my wish.
Thank you, Adam. Tottenham Spurs winning the championship, Premiership.
Yeah, they said. I'd like to see, and I use this very loosely. A nice stepping path back to normality. And I think internally my heart and brain are telling me that it won't be a normal as we knew it, but there has to be some nice normality at some point which allows us to work and just earn a living. And I think that's key for me and all the staff that I have working for me, that we can carry on at a reasonable rate, doing what we love and enjoying it, and keeping people happy.
Thank you. Kevin?
A vaccine. So for me, vaccine equals volume. So let's have less people getting infected, less deaths. Let's get a vaccine would be my one wish, and then we'd start to see confidence and volumes return.
Thank you. Andrew?
Sorry, I'm exactly the same. Vaccine, it will put back the confidence. Employees will understand that there's good duty of care, that they will let their people back out to events. It's a vaccine that we need.
Thank you, Andrew. Neil?
If it was just one wish,
Yeah,
100% vaccine. It has to be. Everything else can then go from there. So if it was just one wish that I was allowed, it has to be a vaccine.
Okay, John?
Definitely a vaccine. I think in terms of a date wish, I hope come Christmas Day that we are surrounded by our family and friends and we can enjoy it, being blunt, and hopefully we're feeling a bit more positive, and that we're going into 2021 with a feeling of more optimism. And at the moment, yes, it feels bleak today. It's a roller coaster, this. 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we might have felt more positive. I think it will change, and hopefully it'll change again. We just need to keep our heads above water as best we can. And I think, as someone said earlier, that if we come out of this more joined as an industry, as leaders, we're more open and honest with each other, that we are as friends speaking with one voice. I think that will be one positive that will come out of it.
Thank you, John. And Greg?
Well, I would again say exactly the same. Vaccine, without a doubt. Having said that, as they've all my friends here have said it, I guess an extension of the furlough, some sort of method of us keeping that talent within our businesses, a method of us keeping our happy families together. I can't wait to get people back into the office and have that wonderful camaraderie that we all enjoy. We're in the most fantastic industry, the most exciting industry that is out there. I love the live events business because it's the most pure. You get one go. It's not like being a restaurateur or a publican. You get one go, like the blue touch paper, and run. We all can't wait to get back to events, but I want my smarties, my people with me. So extension of furlough as well as vaccine. I'm greedy. I want it all.
Thank you, Greg. And look, and thank you to all of you. You've been very candid and open, so thank you. We have recorded this and we'll be releasing this tomorrow morning. So thank you so much indeed. Thank you for your time today. And thank you to all those who have joined us today. Thank you. I hope you found this interesting. I look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Take care, guys.